Good evening, everyone. The time is 5 p.m. and the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees are now convened in a workshop on Monday, November the 17th, 2025. A quorum of board members is present. This meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. First item on the agenda is public comments. I believe there are none. Moving on to item 3. Board workshop, budget overview. Dr. Goldman.
Yes, thank you, Ward. Thank you for being here this evening. As I was reflecting walking in today, so it was 19 months ago that you blessed me and named me superintendent for Belton ISD. I believe my first official day might have been April Fool's Day. And during these first 19 months, one of the challenges that we've worked on together as a team of 8 and with our other staff members and team members is really addressing a budget to support the very vision that our community held for our students. And so you know the story of our stakeholders coming together to help us develop their hopes and dreams for our students as they walk across the stage in Belton ISD, and that vision has driven our work. They also gave us the words for the values and beliefs that our board has adopted and that we have used as we have gone through the process of trying to solve some challenging problems with school finance. You know, during that time we were facing and still are facing a significant amount of inflationary costs to goods and services. All of the things we've talked about in the past. We saw a decrease in our federal funding. We have had attendance challenges for students across the state and nation post-COVID, which impacts funding specifically in our state and how we are funded. And during this time, we also knew that we were facing some significant deficit budgets. We had been adopting some deficits, budget shortfalls, really in trying to continue to compensate staff, and during that time while doing it, also seeing a decrease in our fund balance. And so we were at a point where we had to get to work, and if y'all recall, we launched a budget advisory committee that's really informed a lot of the budget reductions that we have been making today. And so tonight, we are just gathered here to really engage in a conversation about the future as we look forward to our budget, particularly as we've been working with our budget board committee on the 26-27 budget. So we'll take a quick look back. We're going to look at current reality and then going to engage you as a board in really goals around the budget. Ideal and then anchored in what we are seeing as current reality as we look at the 26-27 budget specifically. And so with that, joined by Todd Schiller, Melissa Lafferty, Mike Morgan, Melissa will be leading a good portion of the conversation. They will jump in either with thoughts as we go through or can help address questions as well. But big picture, this is our purpose this evening, and so Melissa's going to jump in and start with just talking big picture budget milestones and our timeline for budget development in Belton.
Okay, I want to quickly run you through the budget timeline over the next several months until we get ready to adopt a budget. For some of the board members, I'm not sure if you were here during last year's, about this time when we were preparing for budget. So throughout the month of January, we will continue refining our estimate of what that state funding is going to look like for us going into 26-27. Again, that state aid template is still catching up with all the legislative changes, and the formulas are being adjusted as we speak, and so that will continually update throughout the spring, and then we'll start developing a budget. We plan to bring you budget assumptions for your approval in February, which we do every year. And then in March, we'll start releasing campus and departmental budgets and get them planning their budgets, and then they are required to have those back entered into Skyward and ready to wrap up into the budget in May. As we progress into April, we will get preliminary estimates from the appraisal district, and that will tell us how close we were on our assumption of property value growth at that time. If the board requests or is interested in an efficiency audit, I have the auditors ready, and they have an engagement letter ready, if interested, that they can begin work around the end of January, beginning of February timeframe, and have that audit completed and ready to review by April. And then, of course, budget workshops were needed. Primarily, we generally have one around June for the compensation plan. And then in July, we will receive the certified property values from the appraisal district and begin calculating our tax rates and getting ready for budget adoption and tax rate adoption in August.
So y'all adopted this year's budget in August, and pretty much the budget board committee got to work right after that was passed. So these last 2 months have already been looking into what 26, 27 potentially could look like.
Right. Okay, so I want to quickly walk you back to that budget workshop back in June of 2024. We were facing a $10 million deficit at that time. And like Melinda had alluded to earlier, we were facing some significant challenges as far as slowing enrollment growth. On average, we've been growing in enrollment around 3.4%, and then coming into 23-24, it just kind of dropped and has hovered at around a little over 1% ever since. Fast growth allotment, of course, was decreasing due to that slowing growth in our enrollment. And then attendance levels were hovering around a little over 94% and weren't back up to pre-COVID levels. In February of that year, we were surprised, got an unexpected surprise from the Texas Health and Human Services that we were receiving a 50% reduction in our Medicaid reimbursements from our 2022 cost report. Now keep in mind, we had already submitted that cost report a year prior. So they got caught up in an OIG audit, the state did, and they were billing incorrectly as far as random moments within the SHARS program. And so the state gave us a big surprise, and so we had budgeted for that funding, and we're quickly seeing a reduction of $1.3 million. So that was a big surprise to us for the 23-24. And then as we were getting ready to adopt a budget for 23-24, the legislature made that last minute requirement that you had to have armed security guards at each of the campuses, which then increased our expenditures an additional $1 million just at the last minute. And of course, as always, we're fighting those inflationary costs. And as we were looking into 24-25, without any reductions, we were facing about a $13.5 million deficit.
And without the known of House Bill 2.
Without the known of House Bill 2.
Yeah, so we had a legislative session at the end of that 24-25 year, which obviously helped us quite a bit towards that deficit.
All right, so this slide right here basically kind of summarizes those reductions since 2023-24 and through 25-26. So you can see we've done quite a bit of work in regards to looking for reductions in that budget to the tune of about $13.1 million. Most of the significant reductions is just aligning to our staffing guidelines, strictly adhering to those. We've reduced campus and departmental budgets up to 25% to find additional savings, and then reducing educational aides, custodials, and central office staff to the tune a little over $1 million. These numbers also include benefits as well, and if you were to take these numbers and try to tie them back to the adopted budget, a lot of these reductions were happening at different periods of time and won't necessarily, because they're netting against the additions as well, because we did raises and there were additional expenditures. So if you try to net that out, you wouldn't necessarily see that on the face of the budget. But the timing of those is very fluid as to when those were happening.
Just as a side note, so as y'all are aware, like we've increased class sizes, and so that's a lot of the teacher FTE ratios that you're seeing there, teacher FTE guidelines there. 2 years ago, we were at 1 to 26. Entering this year, we moved to 1 to 28 at the secondary levels.
Okay. Becca? No, it's not wording. Can you advance it for me? Oh, great, it's just on this slide too, of course. So for 23-24, we had adopted a $5 million deficit budget. With those challenges that we were facing. And about mid-year, we received, around February, we received our preliminary state values that the appraisal district had submitted to the state comptroller's office. And at that time, due to those legislative changes, the homestead, increase in the homestead exemption, and the retroactive tax compression for those folks that are over 65 and the tax freeze, that created some complications and challenges in this, for most of the appraisal districts across the state because their systems hadn't quite caught up to the calculation of that retroactive tax compression. So it created challenges in the submissions to the comptroller's office. And so in February, we received our preliminary values were out of whack, basically from the state value. Which was swinging, in addition to that loss in that Medicaid reimbursement funding, was swinging our revenues another $5 million, to the bad, right? Now, as soon as we noticed that, we immediately protested those values, and but we had to wait until August before we knew whether or not we were going to win that protest. So we had to kind of carry this $10 million deficit until we knew otherwise from the state comptroller's office. So that's when those state values get out of sync with the certified values, where your collections and state values are they're now out of sync. It can create some havoc in your revenue projections.
So can you kind of explain? I was trying to comparing that to the bond presentation where we showed the M&O cup, and it's like your local property taxes and the state fills the rest of the cup up to whatever they've decided is the base allotment.
Yeah.
So why does a change in our local property values change what our net revenues are?
It's not necessarily the change in the property values, so it's your estimation. So if you get your certified values and you estimate your collections, and then if your estimation of those state values don't correlate with that increase in your values for collections, it could have a negative impact. So you can potentially over budget. So at the time, I thought I had over budgeted to the tune of about $4 million because of that disconnect between preliminary values and what I had estimated for collections.
So like we estimated we were going to collect 98%, and they said we should collect 100% or something.
Well, it isn't based on collections. It's just how because the state funds us. The state funding is based on state values, and your tax collections is based on your certified values from your appraisal district. And so they're two. It's like trying to compare apples and oranges. And so sometimes projecting that value is a little tricky. It's from time to time they can get out of sync. Some of it under your control, some of it not. And so it can be a big surprise factor come early February, whether or not you over budgeted. Nonetheless, we did win the protest and came in at around a $4 million deficit in actuality, but kind of had to go through the pain of that protest, waiting on the results of that protest in August. So then going into 24-25, we were facing I'm just going to round up, a $13.5 million deficit without doing any reductions, any work at all. And so we immediately, we had already kind of seen this coming, had immediately got to work in 23-24 and started looking for those reductions and ended up using, based on those reductions we saw in the previous slide, we're able to decrease that deficit budget to $8.1 million, knowing going into the 25-26 year we still had work to do. So for 25-26, before we knew what was going to happen with House Bill 2, we were facing $11.5 million deficit going into that year. That would have been under old law and not under House Bill 2 at the time. And so again, we continued to find those reductions, almost 5.6 million in reductions. And then the state came through for us in House Bill 2, which allowed us to basically, with the help of the adoption of disaster pennies, allowed us to be able to adopt a balanced budget. Going into next year, we will no longer have those disaster pennies, and we're going to look at that here in a few minutes.
Any other questions on just the budget history before we head to the next? We can always come back if you want to come back.
All right. So these are the budget increases that are netting against the work we're doing in regards to reductions. For 24-25, we did a 1% raise, and then there was an increase if you were to look at expenditures from 23-24 to 24-25. In the 23-24 budget, the TRS on behalf, when we calculated salaries, it calculated less than it probably should have, but it doesn't really affect the budget overall because it calculates a revenue and expenditure that offset one another. And so that's in there just if you were trying to tie that back between the 2 years. Insurance and utilities are always going up, so increasing 800,000, and then we added a little over 1.89 million in sped positions. Tom, you remember, elaborate further on the 1.89 million for 24-25. Those were additional positions that we were needing.
Primarily regarding special ed, increase in
ed.
enrollment of students. We were needing to increase some of our special ed staffing levels as well.
So again, these increases, we're finding reductions, but then increases are netting against those decreases. And then 25-26, with the help of House Bill 2, we were able to do, the raise for teachers, where 3 to 4 year experienced teachers got $2,500, and then your over 5-year teachers got $5,000. It was a 1% raise for everyone, and then a 50-cent raise for the paraprofessionals and auxiliary. Again, insurance and utilities constantly going up, and we temporarily had to absorb the title grant funds at the time because we did not have a NOGA. And so we went ahead and budgeted those into the general fund because we already had people in positions that were funded out of title grant funds. And once we got a NOGA, we would we would move those back out to the grant funds, federal funds. And then increased expenditures as a result of those disaster pennies for storm repairs and facility improvements for the 25-26 year.
So I think y'all know this because y'all have been on this journey of budget development and adoption. These are the things that are the challenges. You decrease your expenditures, and then as your enrollment in our population of students receiving special education goes up, the expenditures and need for additional special education teachers. So there's this offsetting a little bit that's happening in you're cutting, but then you're adding back as we've gotten more students. I mean, we went, most school districts across the state were sitting at about 7 and 8% was about an average you would see of students receiving special education services prior to COVID. We are sitting right at 20% now. So we've seen a significant increase. And so we're adding positions as we've been reducing expenditures all throughout this process. And then, of course, as Melissa said, as we've all experienced at home, utility rates are continuing to go up, insurance rates are continuing to go up. So there's this reduction, and then you have to add. Reduction, you have to add that we've been experiencing over these last 2 years.
Melinda, can I ask a question on what you just said? You said that before COVID, about 7 to 8% of the schools, of the students in the schools enrolled were receiving special ed.
Gabby, is that right? In that, when the state average across the state?
That's the state average, and then now we're at 20%. What does it look like? What does our district look like? Is that consistent with other districts that they've all gone up, or is that mostly just us?
No, go ahead, Gabby.
Sorry. We have seen a rise across districts in the state of Texas. And yes, there are contributing factors like post-pandemic learning loss, but we also have some legal changes in how we identify students for special education, including dyslexia was not previously included in under special education in Texas, where it was across the nation, and so that's a change as well that has impacted our percentages.
Okay, thank you.
That's probably our biggest number, right, when we picked up dyslexia. I mean, like I said, the state of Texas didn't consider it special ed qualified, but the rest of the nation did. Eventually, the federal government told the state, yeah, you are gonna do this. And that, I mean, we'd been serving those kids all along,
Yes.
but they didn't fall under that.
Correct. We were serving primarily under Section 504.
Right.
Another area that we've seen a large gain in is other health impairments, where individuals who have things such as ADHD were previously given accommodations through 504, who may be meeting eligibility for special education now.
How do we fare statewide? What's the statewide overall percentage versus us now?
So we're
We're at 20%.
We're at 20%, and I think it's 18 to 19% across the state. So we are just
Okay.
Slightly higher.
Just a hair over, okay.
Thank you.
Listen, do we get any, I don't remember this now, but do we get any additional funding for the special ed kids? We do, right?
Yeah, they're weighted, they're on a
Right,
weighted funding.
on the weighted scale, okay.
Now, there were changes in legislation and how our students would be funded. We're not going to know until, we've been told until the end of this school year, what the impact of those
Right.
changes were on special education funding. So we still don't know and won't know till most likely after the school year ends.
Yeah, it'll be late.
In terms of what really was the impact of that legislation on funding.
So we don't know how much money, additional funds we're going to receive, right?
No. Brad Buckley said they had no idea, basically. The pot of money, and we don't know how we're gonna weigh it out. So we're kind of in the rears on that money, carrying it all the way through the years. We're still providing the services, but we don't know what our reimbursement's gonna look like at this point.
Melissa, is it still, are you hearing it'll still be after school?
Yeah, and I've also heard, if there is an increase, it wouldn't be significant increases too, so, time will tell. All right, so, wanted to share, this is where we are right now. For 24-25, we are coming in at around a $2.5 million deficit budget. So this is actual activity as of November 6th. We're still currently under audit, but we are pretty much at the end of, for general fund anyways, it's pretty much wrapped up as far as we can tell, unless the auditors find another adjustment. So we're looking at about $2.5 million deficit in the general fund for 24-25. A lot of that swing was the sale of the property. We had additional revenues that came in higher than expected, and then we left about a little over $1.5 million in expenditures on the table.
So we asked everyone, this concept of spending down budgets does not happen anymore. If that were ever the practice, everyone was asked, monitor every penny, be very careful with your spending. And while we were never under a hiring freeze, every position was looked at in terms of when vacancies came up. And so that is a significantly better outcome than we were projecting, which has, when it comes in our final audit and we see that, it will help us with fund balance, so you'll see. We were concerned about going down as low as 11%. If that holds true, we'll be at 23% in fund balance, which is within policy for our district. So we're exceptionally happy about that.
Ready for 25?
can be.
Oh,
Okay, 13 million versus
Yeah.
2.5 million,
Yeah.
it's still a deficit, yes.
It's great progress.
But it is tremendous progress, so let me better qualify that.
all right, for 25-26, again, we adopted that balanced budget. Wanted to kind of show you the net of the amendments to date. So you can see there that expenditures are reducing $282,022. So we're moving those title funding expenditures that we budgeted in the general fund. We have now moved those back out to the federal funds. We have notice of grant awards, which has allowed us to do that. So those are moved out. And then the Tiger Field lighting is now coming in and increasing those expenditures. So and then we got an insurance claim for a bus accident. So that $15,488, we received the insurance proceeds, and I went ahead and increased transportation's budget so they can go ahead and get those repairs done on that bus. And if you're wondering about the $17,048 in the state aid, that's the TRS on behalf, for those TRS on behalf expenditures in that 528, whatever it's hard for me to see, the payroll of 288,000. Okay. So right now we're sitting at a $280,000 surplus.
Our payroll for actual, it's almost right on budget, so I'm just curious as we continue to budget for the vacancy factor, that's not actually coming to fruition, like the actual savings are in other expenses. I mean, there's some jobs that are in there.
Yeah, some of it is in the supplies, and operating,
Does that payroll actual include other like TRS on behalf stuff that's
Yes,
not
it's got,
budgeted
yeah,
for?
TRS on behalf that's in there. Again, there's a revenue offset to those expenditures.
So that essentially-
Correct. There's also a payroll accrual, right, that happens for year end, some of that.
And then are we anticipating that we won't get the title funds next year?
No. I think the problem was they weren't issuing the NOGAs, and so we weren't guaranteed an entitlement until you had a notice of grant award. I say NOGA. So at the time, we didn't know whether or not we were going to get them or not.
But I think is your question, are we anticipating getting them next year?
Right, so our payroll, at least from what current budget to next year's budget anticipated is the same, but we know that in actuality, we were able to move some of those back to the title.
Right,
So
yes,
it's
yeah,
still in
right,
question
that
about
$500,000,
whether-
yeah, we won't have to budget that. So, right, did I answer
But
that
are you
correctly?
currently showing it in there, I think is the question.
No, because that would have been actual budget.
Okay, it's, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because not all of that was payroll. The $500,000 in title funding was not all payroll. There were also services and supplies in that number as well. Going into 26-27 right now, we're looking at a $2.5 million deficit budget. Again, this is a rough estimate. We've just started. Again, the template is refining itself, so we'll know more in a couple of months, especially as we get more attendance data for the current year. That'll help us line out going into next year to figure out what the revenues are going to be out of that state funding for 26-27. Help us plan better.
So let's pause there for just a minute. So in the yellow box, right now, that $2.5 million deficit, that assumes zero compensation changes. So raises and compensation are not built into that currently. There is a little bit of an increase for anticipation of the increase of utility costs and insurance
About
costs.
$600,000.
So that is in there. It is also in there, I believe, still an assumption if we were to only keep capital projects at 500, is that in here or have we not added that yet?
No, that would be an assumption of 500,000, right?
Is that in there
Yes.
right now? Okay. So as we will look at what our assumptions have been in the past, and then we're going to get into a conversation. I'm going to ask y'all to kind of elbow up with a partner and start talking about goals for us as we move forward into this budget and moving forward. But like with the Prop A didn't pass. So in light of that, is the board going to be interested in increasing the dollar amount? We've been spending about 1.1, 1.2 million annually on facilities maintenance expenditures. We had been setting aside 500, so 500,000 to support capital projects, and so if that dollar amount, if that's the will of the board, then we would need to take that into consideration because none of that is included in here. So right now, the only assumption built in is around increased utility costs and insurance costs, and an assumption of a $4 million vacancy factor. So what we would like to do is show you what the assumptions were last year, and then engage y'all, get you talking to each other about, as we think about moving into 26, 27, in light of what we're showing based on what we know today. Want to hear, ideally, what are your goals for budget? And then based on that ideal, then looking at what's current reality and helping us prioritize what the assumptions are that we would bring back to you for approval. You don't have to approve assumptions. That's not a legal requirement for school boards. It is something we've been doing just to make sure, board, are we hitting the targets that you're setting as we go into the development and ultimately bring you that 26, 27 budget. So Melissa, you want to hit, these are the assumptions that where we started initially with the board and where we ended up for developing this year's budget.
Right. So the assumptions really that the board should typically weigh in on is going to be, staff pay increases. What are your expectations in that area? Again, like Melinda stated, the capital projects, and potentially maybe even employee benefits, right? How much we contribute to their health care premiums. Average daily attendance and property values, those kind of manage themselves. It's just a matter of just trying to project those, trend them out, and determining what those are. At the end of the day, we find out anyways by July. So, but wanted y'all to just kind of help you jumpstart you a little bit on your thought process as those things that Melinda's trying to get feedback on in regards to, what are your expectations?
So I think we're going to stop there, and we'd really like for you to, we're going to elbow up, so maybe if the three of y'all will talk, maybe Brandon, Aaron, I'll get out of the way, Chris and Emmanuel, and really just want to y'all to be able to talk about what are your goals for the budget? What are you ideally really hoping we will work towards? And then we'll have a whole group discussion, and what we're listening for, what are those big picture goals? Maybe that can't be accomplished in a year, maybe could only be accomplished in multiple years out. But in light of what we're looking at current reality, really want to hear y'all's thoughts. So we're gonna let y'all talk and then just have the board do some whole group share out.
Can I ask a question before we get into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So on the previous slide, slide 8, the yellowy, orangey on the right-hand side, is that with or without disaster pennies?
Without.
Without,
Yeah,
okay.
that's, we're losing the disaster
Right,
pennies
I
going
just wanted
into
to make sure.
26, 27.
Okay,
So a lot of that $2.5 million is
Right.
disaster penny.
right, okay.
Okay. So let's talk, what are you thinking in terms of goals?
What's your goal?
Yes.
I'll wheel over to see it. Can't follow that.
Can I just listen now?
just the last thing, yellow.
Yeah.
The capital projects.
Relating on what your actual, your ADA, your student enrollment, their
For
average
500.
daily.
We don't have this 1.1,
Just a lot of big variables. Like I want it pretty pure. I want to
Right,
see,
so.
That's not in
these are
there.
expenditures, I want to see what team does. Problem is, also during that time, we have positions for special ed, our utility costs went up, our insurance went up. And so just we're
But the good
trying
news is,
this,
fund balance is at. Make this bigger.
Yeah.
20% already. So we know it's gonna drop this.
Yeah, it'll drop us below. Yeah. Well, right, so if we say, hey, look,
we kept 500 purely as capital projects, but all of the rest of the disaster fund pennies, yes, they were in our 6,400 account.
it's
So,
all
I
about
mean,
the
they're all
trade-offs.
lumped together. I mean, this is just above and beyond what is in that normal budget.
I think it was 585. It was replacing
Adopted.
some
Right,
HVAC
they're
and some
selling
facility.
It was a total of,
585
that's how much we used.
So we, yes, we have more
towards
than
HVAC.
500.
Yeah, it had to
The
go.
total amount of COVID money.
But just
that was like
historically, we've put out projects separate from.
But that money was not
Maintenance and
free for us to
operation.
use.
And so all those pennies went into that.
Only for airplanes.
Yeah,
only for airport.
yeah. We couldn't have done this against law. So they gave the money and said, you will hire these positions.
Well,
That's right, right.
So now we can start That's not teachers.
It's annually, Todd, our health premiums, annually.
Those 2 years.
They're not locked in for longer than a
The
year.
only thing we did do,
There'll be a
we also
reevaluation
increased,
There's a review where there's gonna even be Blue Cross.
yes. No, we did, we did that. We added,
it's a bigger chunk.
assistant principal positions, which we needed. We were behind on those. We added counselor positions, which we were behind on.
As you should.
In terms of
So
benefits,
as
so
far
that's
as
just more. I thought
adding
we were gonna say.
anything as far as central staff,
expenditures in these
no, not that I
different
can think of. But when you say central staff, one thing you have to remember, and you need to talk to principals. Anything you cut up here gets pushed down to the campus level. So if you cut somebody up here, they're doing something that we have to do per the state. And so anything that you cut, you're now putting it on a principal saying, hey, y'all are gonna have to do this at your place. And they're gonna tell you, where do you want me to do it? I don't have a teacher, I'm down to this position, I'm a principal, I'm already working, 17 hours a day, I'm not gonna do this. And so there's always gonna be a give and take when you do that. So, go ahead, Don.
11 million for ESSER 3. There was a little more for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, so the total probably was closer to about 15 million.
Yeah, and we had to buy technology, yeah, we had to buy technology. Yeah.
And so that's what she's asking.
Yeah, and when they gave you the money, it was like anything else. It wasn't a free-for-all. It was, here's this money, here's what you're gonna use it for. Like everything else, like air quality is one of the only things that we could.
But that's the visual, right?
We used a lot of it on, a crap load of it
That happened 2 years in a row.
on disinfectants, the hand wash, the bottle refillers. Because you gotta remember, think back, that a lot of this stuff didn't exist prior to COVID. The masks we had, all this work. There were lots of things that we suddenly had to do. Yes. Oh, yeah, we had to have it here for every student and every staff. Rubber gloves, I mean, just things that you would never assume when you start buying it in bulk. Oh, and you're buying it at a time when everybody in the nation is out there buying it. The prices were here. So,
I don't remember that.
and we're not state funded, we're federal funded. So I know that there's people out there who are going to spend money. Actually, no, the law said, this is what you'll spend the money on. Anything else you do with it, you're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah, they were trying to tell us.
And you're not getting stuff this
You
year.
need to revise those out.
I remember we're sitting at 222.
I know I'm all for it.
Really, the thing too, that
Okay. Let's say we can get to about 2%.
Add your fund balance.
Hey,
And that's why they, I think we
yes.
You gotta keep cutting, so it's just, eventually
we're gonna ride this out.
And I think that's what we gave the grant.
Yeah, it'd have been, well, that's true.
And then
Well,
there's another
here's,
10 to
like, the
15%
conversation right now is not about solving this.
audit that
I mean, that's the next step.
that we still have.
Yeah.
there was a bunch of.
I don't think it was.
Right.
Well,
I think there were some campuses who had 0.
it felt.
There's no campus with zero, but you have to remember that in our.
Campuses got here, but some districts.
Well, yeah, but I would want to then look at their academics and see, I mean, 'cause that's something that we value in this community. And if you go talk to the teachers and the parents that have these kids, that have these instructional coaches, I mean, they are invaluable. When we started doing the cuts, there wasn't a lot of area. You have to remember, it's easy to stand up here and cut down and think, well,
For someone not
but
to
if you
develop.
dive into it and you start talking to these teachers and these parents, you know, the cuts that we're able to make, we made 3 years ago. I mean, we made those cuts then. There's not, I mean, I think you were in the budget committee. There's not a lot of fluff, and you can look at positions and say, do we need it? And I think that's a talk you can have, but I think you really have to understand what those positions do. Because if we have a person who's paying, they're not doing their work, then they need to be done. But if we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna cut this position, and that instructional aid is helping 27 kids on a campus, a swing of 27 kids on a campus can take you from a B down to a C grade automatically, or D down to an
Yeah,
F.
so it's 90.
So you really have to, you know, find out, you know, are they doing their jobs? And our biggest instructional aid to student ratio is in our highest need campuses, because those kids show up typically on average 2 to 3 years with peers in first and second grade. So when they walk in the door to kindergarten and first grade, they're already 2 to 3 years with their peers at Lakewood, at Sparta. And we are playing catch up from that point on with them. So, yes, yes. I mean, it's a problem that every school fights. We're not alone in that. Like I've always said, if you want to give me somebody, you know, you tell me what their test rates are, and I can tell you what the demographics are in that school. I can tell you how much score they have and everything. So again, I mean, we can look at that, but my goal is that, you know, we have to find a way to maintain fund balance that's in policy and it makes sense. We also have to maintain the staff that makes everything possible that we do, and that may mean that we're not able to do raises at some point to maintain staff level. We haven't increased our employee benefit payments, I think.
We need to know that.
Yeah, I would want to hear something.
And that goes up on an average of 18% per year.
Because if you
I
can.
mean, it's $410 is what we give them for. And you gotta remember, we have a certain number of people who work here,
Alright,
here,
so question
even
for you.
teachers. Some of them just with health insurance. But that number's getting higher and higher. I mean, that's, you know, I'm not saying they're great teachers, but maybe their husband makes a really good living, but in a field where they don't provide benefits. That's right. So we have to, I think, improve that.
Well, yeah, because some of these are new to
That number's not coming down.
be adjusted.
Health insurance will come down almost 30 years of living. It ain't coming down. And the state of Texas doesn't fund it the way they do the other state agencies. The state of Texas funds the other state agencies. So all of your elected officials, not us, but your state elected officials, your state DPS, nothing against them, but they are funded by the state, so it's meaning about 85%.
Yeah, no, I know.
All benefits are 85%. We get, I mean, we get a little bit, but, what's the TRS health insurance system, the state doesn't completely fund it. It never has. It's a ticking time bomb. I know because it's an insurance matter, and TDI has looked at it and told the state, you have a ticking time bomb on your hands. You're not fully funding this health insurance. The state's like, well, let's put an IOU over there. They've been doing it for years. Started in 98 was the first big crash. Not the first, but the crash of 98. The state of Texas took, I think it was $7 billion out of the education fund to balance their budget. They never put it back. They put an IOU in it, but they never put it back, and that's where a lot of this stuff is. Now, we can't solve those problems, I don't care, but talking about goals, I want to be able to maintain the staff that are helping our kids succeed. I don't believe that we're overstaffed in central office, but if you show me something, we can find it. I just know that in talking to the other people, it's like, hey, if you remove that person, they were doing something that now has to be done at the campus level. And I don't know how much more you want to put on campus level.
I think that'll put some value in. One thing that doesn't say, like you said, is how those campuses. It has them all in this, they're all sister campuses, but they're all campuses within 10 to 15,000 students, just like ours. So they're all comparable districts.
Well, no, so you don't compare it in size, though. You can. What I would suggest is, the true demographics, because there are campuses there are schools that are the same size as us, that don't have near the resources, that they're so high economic severity. Think of the valley.
Well, no, I know.
Whereas
Whether it's legal or not, I'm just saying, what
Highland Park.
Yeah.
Highland Park probably does not have a single, I was guarantee they don't have a single education instructional coach. You know why?
Highland Park is being
They do not own a school bus. They do not own one. Why? We don't compete well. We have basically no special needs. And those that we do are dropped off by a driver. So it is, you do have to look at I would say, I think maybe we're close to College Station. Bryan, Georgetown is always a little bit weird because their numbers are skewed.
We're really close to College Station,
Yeah.
Friendship, Georgetown.
But Georgetown's weird.
They're at like 38. This is the last full year of TEA data for 24-25.
Yep.
Georgetown was at like 38.5. We were at 42.
42?
College Station's at 40.6.
Okay.
But did they do inspections? Did they
Like,
do
you have business that has to be,
Should.
Nothing against you, but.
Would you rather take less people to
The final version.
that looks like.
February of 23-24.
Yeah, I mean, it's an impossible question. It's an impossible question.
So the schools that were. And college, the rest
Right. Right.
It doesn't, again, it doesn't show how they're doing, it shows how many economic dispatches. So it's a pretty good comparison. Belton's average, kind of compare across all schools. So Belton has 23 instructional coaches, the average compares to 16.7. So that's a big one. And then look at all the, you can see how many
Oh.
and that's just.
No, we don't.
Yeah, and that-
Yeah, I think the answer's gonna be no. This is a battle, because that's in here already. That's built into the expense. It should be. No, the lights, so the lights are here, so the lights are built in, so where's the field? So the turf, nowhere at all. Okay, so it didn't get updated here based on that it didn't pass. We're only at 9 minutes left.
Okay, all right. So we only have 9 minutes left. We're gonna bring us back together. This is not a landing final budget assumptions. This really is hearing your initial thoughts. We have board budget committee meetings coming up. We typically don't adopt assumptions until February. But this will help us, just this conversation, start to formulate those assumptions. So I'm going to open it up to the room. We have 9 minutes.
Ready to go.
Ready, go.
You want to talk about goals, is that what it is?
Yes.
Well, one goal that Chris and I talked about is not dropping below our policy of 20% for fund balance.
Okay.
And then you work backwards from that. Chris?
I second that. Yeah, I mean, we talked about ideas, right? So if you realize that, you know, you can't implement, if you're not going to talk about implementing it, right, you're just going to throw out ideas, it would be great to put another $1 million on the maintenance. The downfall for that is, you know, to some of those capital improvements, right, that were included in Proposition A. The downfall to that is you take the whole hit for that in that year, right? And you don't get to take it over whatever the life or depreciation was that we were able to take it in a proposition. But we're probably going to be in a position where stuff's going to go out and you got to deal with it right then and there. So if we could get to another $1 million, so make it 1.5 on the capital projects, but the devil's in the details for how that happens. We did not solve that problem, just to be real clear. You know, and also we would love to see, you know, the ability to do an increase. We didn't get to, you know, what is that? Because we quickly got to, well, okay, what does that cost? There's a trade-off there. And the trade-off, you know, becomes, you know, would you rather have the same amount of staff with no increase? Would you rather have less staff with the ability to give an increase, right? Is there a good answer there? There's not a good answer there. So I may be going deeper down the rabbit hole than you want me to go, sorry. But I mean, those were the three things that we were kind of going back and forth about.
I don't want Brandon to get that. But I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Well, y'all go next. I'll say
Oh, go ahead.
Jeff,
We
you're
didn't really
it,
talk
Rucker's
about
it.
the fund balance, but I think that was some of the conversation waiting between the maintenance and personnel, that you want to respect your staff and make sure that they're compensated well, but get an AC that goes out for $500,000 in a room that's 90 degrees, what's the work in that? So there's just challenges we have to figure out. Yeah, there was more discussion about, you know, admin, central admin offices, but also what that does to the classroom teachers and effects downhill. And more stress it puts on a teacher who's already working way over 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I was bringing up the TASB audit that was done in, was it 23, maybe 24, I don't remember.
23.
About our staffing. A good point was made is what that doesn't do, it does show some overstaffing in Belton ISD. What it doesn't do is show how those other 15 campuses, comparable campuses, are performing. So that was a good point that was made. The other thing, I mean, I think that would be good to revisit, but aligning it with the changes, the reductions that have been made. So I would imagine a lot of those positions that we were overstaffed in are now gone. So I think that would be an interesting thing for the board to see is, you know, if we were comparable to those districts overstaffed, are we anymore?
Yeah, so that audit was in 23 and
February
23, 24.
February 24.
Okay,
23,
so
24 school years.
definitely can get that back out to y'all. We also showed you specifically in central office, the reductions that have been made during that time. We cut, I think it said we were 12 positions overstaffed. We cut 13 positions. So I can get that back out to y'all so y'all can take a look at that. That same TASB audit though, if you remember, if we implemented, the goal was never to implement TASB's audit. It was meant to give us some comparison data. If we had implemented everything they had recommended, we actually would have had to have added over $400,000 total district more positions. So it was to give us a sense of where we compared. We've made all of those cuts in so many areas. It was custodial services, health services, our overall pupil-teacher ratio, central office cuts. To get an up-to-date comparison of where everybody is now today, we probably would have to do the study again because districts all across the state were in the same boat we were in. So lots of districts have been looking for ways to reduce expenditures and cut positions, but absolutely can get something back out to y'all to remind you of those positions that we have cut in all those areas.
Mike got this, and I think, if you wouldn't mind, Mike, send this back out to everyone. When you get it, you really need to look at the numbers and dive into them because there's some outliers that are skewing averages. When you look at a place that says they have 0 for certain positions and other people are having 2 or 3, that means they're outsourcing that position. Somebody's doing the work. Some of these say that they don't even have a director of payroll. Well, that's illegal. So yes, you do have a director of payroll. So there are things that are skewed, but if you look at the actual numbers, and instructional coaches was one that you talked on. So, but if I look across here at the high-performing schools, and I know which ones they are, a lot of them have, just like we do, quite a few instructional coaches. But if you look at the actual data, what it shows you is, you know, and this is an average of 12,700 students. We're at 13,800. This is our cohort here. At 12,700, the number of staff is 0.8. We're at 0.9. And this would be considered the central office, non-teaching, all of those different staff members. So I think we have to be very careful when we just look at it because as I just scroll across these numbers and I know some of these districts, I'm like, I know that's not right. I know for a fact that that's, well, one, you have to have a director of payroll. There's money. You just retiled that to another position. And the other thing, and I think this gets out in the community, and Riley rightfully asked about it, and so if you hear this, I think we need to address bad information. And that was the idea that we just spent a bunch of money in ESSER funds and we should have taken care of other things. And I think Riley understands now, when we were given the ESSER funds, we were not given a blank checkbook and said, spend the money. You were told, here are the boxes that you're gonna do with this money. You know, it would have been great to do a lot of maintenance, but like you said, air quality was one of the only things that we were allowed to do. We also spent a lot of money, if y'all remember, on hygiene, on new water stations, on electronics, but everything that we did with the ESSER funds, in case it does get out there where they just spent all this money, You know, we spend it the way the government said, this is
Very
exactly what you're gonna do with these dollars. So we need to always just remember and go back when you hear things, and maybe they are real, but go back and ask somebody, hey, tell me about this. You know, did we really just spend all that money? Just, no, we did what we were told to do with it, which is, you know, and I think something very interesting, and then I'll end it, because I always talk about staff growing and all that. There's a piece of paper out there, maybe one or two of you will remember it, but it was the TEA guidelines for education in the 1970s. And it was what public education was being held required to do in the 1970s. It was one page. Do you remember that, Chris? It was one page. It was a one-page document, and it said, this is what we require of it. That thing is now like 40-something pages long.
Yeah.
So Texas has said over the years, oh, now this. Because the original, it was like, there were like 12 bullet points that this is all we expect of public education. And so a lot of our people don't know what they do, there's a lot of compliance issues just with the state and federal government that we have to do. And if we don't do it, we're in trouble as a board because we're held to that. That's our standard. So just something to think about.
I'll jump in on there too, when you say dive into the details, because it doesn't show academic, I didn't see it in there.
I just do a couple of those.
And I know if you're talking about cutting instructional coaches, I mean, I think you and I are the only ones that taught in the past. But I know as a classroom teacher, having an instructional coach that can pull out students is so invaluable for the students who come in each year who are below grade level, you're trying to bring them up. So I think that's, I
So,
don't know.
Not totally, what it says is we have about 16.7, I think he said 16.7. How you have a 0.7 in there, instructional coaches, I don't know. Compared to, no, we have 23 and the average is 16.7, that's how it would be. So just that there's more, what I'm saying in general is we can look at something like that,
But on that one, I think when y'all get that, look at it, and look at it again, and the reason I say that is the data's skewed because it has 3 districts on there that show that they have no instructional coaches. So they're either outsourcing them, or like I said, they're a district that's got such high performing, they're a wealthy school district and they really don't have kids that they're trying to catch up. And we're mandated by law on those instructional coaches to pull the kids out.
I think you're thinking intervention.
Or interventionist, yeah.
So we are required for minutes with intervention, and so a couple of things, one, our ESSER funds are way gone.
Wish we had them back.
That was closed out a couple of years ago. And so we don't have those funds moving forward. And yes, some of those funds were even used for staff compensation because like districts all across the state, everybody was struggling with hiring teachers, as we still are. And some of those funds were used for teacher retention, staff retention. So big picture, what I heard, and then I gotta let you go so that you can go to your student showcase, and I'll ask you to, if you'll go just directly to the front row so they can get started as soon as we leave here. So I'm hearing, let's try not to go below 20% fund balance. If we could get up to 1.5 in capital projects, that would be incredible. We wanna increase compensation, continue to look at reductions to include central office. I think those were the big goals. Did I miss anything? Okay.
they didn't get a chance.
No, I mean.
Yeah, no, that's the same. I mean, you throw in like long-term aspirational, I think getting our student teacher ratio back down.
Eventually
at
drop
secondary
that.
would be great. Achieving a balanced budget.
And we talked about getting our health insurance
Yes.
supplement up because we haven't changed that in 4 years and the number goes up by 18% per year.
Yep, that was in our.
So get
discussion
people
as well.
teacher ratio down, increase our supplemental for insurance. And I thought there was one other thing you said.
Just balance.
Oh, and balance. Okay.
Balance.
So we're at 2.5 million going into it. We want to add 1.5 for capital, give pay raises, drop people teacher ratio, and balance.
These were goals, not solving the problem.
I appreciate that. No, thank y'all so much for, let us get started, but hearing long-term goals for the budget, for the board, super important for us as we get to work. And so just appreciate y'all diving in tonight.
Well, that concludes our board workshop this evening. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 6:03 PM.